Welcome to Corporate Bytes. I'm Rich Bowers, and today I have the illustrious guest, Raymond McIntyre, here with me today. Ray, before I say hello to you, just a quick view into your background. Wonderful experience in learning and development at E&Y, PwC, Sony, as well as a professor too. So great credentials, and we're happy to have you here today. But good morning, Ray.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me. Not a full professor, in all honesty, an adjunct professor at both at Felician University and Bergen Community College. So yes, good times. Yes, I've had the opportunity to shape and mold young minds. I don't know where they are
Awesome.
today. I hope they're doing well.
I'm sure they're succeeding with that type of guidance,
There we
and
go. There we
and
go.
and during our conversation today, you're going to be doing the same thing. So we have one of actually both of our favorite topics, right? Is professional branding. And as the current manager of learning and development at Collabra, I know that you actually host this session live for the employees there. So I thought, who better to bring on and talk about professional branding than yourself? So thanks again for joining. Ready to dive in?
Yes. Thank you.
Uh,
I appreciate it. It's in fact, this is a really important topic. So we have a group of interns. Just going a little off topic here.
sure. Yeah.
We have summer interns, and one of the projects I have them working on is building out their professional brand plan.
Oh,
And I kicked off this event several weeks ago. We meet on a weekly basis, and I've been telling them that I had wished. I'm much older than you, of course, as you can tell, all gray hairs. But
this
one of
is
the
only
things that,
audio, by the way, so nobody could tell.
oh, okay, thank God. I don't want to traumatize people. As I always joke, every time I walk by the mirror, I laugh hysterically. But one of the things I was telling them was I wish that somebody had told me back in my early days as a young professional the importance of managing your personal slash professional brand and how important it is, because it makes a difference when you're applying for a job or vying for a promotion, or you're looking for different opportunities. And just to clarify, it's not just for professional purposes, but also for practical or personal different applications as well. So yeah, this is a topic that I love to talk about. I think it's so important because most people just don't even think about it. So I think it's an important topic.
Excellent. No, I'm glad you have the passion for it.
Yeah.
So why don't we start at just the top part of it, right? Because a lot of people don't think about it at all. In your own definition, what is professional branding?
You know, this is the way I think of it. Several years ago, I started thinking about this, and I started thinking about, is it possible? Does it make sense? Should a person have a brand? And much of my background is, of course, L&D, learning and development, but it's also in marketing. And in fact, my master's degree is business and marketing. And you know, if you think about all the companies like Apple, McDonald's, Lexus, Toyota, all these companies that they spend millions and millions of dollars on branding. And what is brand? So let's think about this. What is
Mhm.
brand? When you look at a brand, I can drive by a McDonald's, I see the golden arches, I know automatically it's going to be French fries and hamburgers, it's going to be tasty, hot and fresh, etc. Um, you know,
They pay you
I'm
for that?
paraphrasing.
No.
What's that?
They just paid
Yeah.
you for that?
Yes, they did, in fact. And yes, it's fattening. It's not very healthy for you. I wouldn't do it every day. That aside, but like if I see the brand, the logo for Lexus, I know it's a premier automobile. It's refined, all this other stuff. My point is that brand, it communicates a feeling, an emotion, and an attribute, a quality. So, you asked me, what is professional branding? I think professional branding, first and foremost, is this first acknowledgement that everybody has one. Your brand, Mr. Bowers, as I always call you, is very unique. It's specific to you. How you communicate yourself, how you communicate to others, the quality of your work, your deliverables, all those things. My brand is different than yours. And that's a good thing.
Yes.
Everybody
Yeah.
should have a unique. Obviously, there's That's what makes the world economy so interesting. There's so many different products and services based on these different brands.
That
So I think I would just say that professional branding is the acknowledge first and foremost, it's an acknowledgement that everybody has a brand. Second, I would say that it's understanding that you can use your brand, whatever that may be, for your benefits. And we can talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but that's a quick kickoff.
that's a great summary. And every time that I've talked about brand too, I talk about that emotion that a brand brings. And you mentioned attributes and quality, and isn't it's something that one of the best ways to realize about brands is to think about corporations. Just as you just explained it, right? It seems like it's an easy transition from, okay, I could see the corporation brands,
Mhm.
and then moving it more to a micro feel of yourself.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that. And just to hit on one piece too, is you said that everybody has a brand, right? And again, kind of piggybacking off of the initial piece, was not everybody is aware of it, or tries to build it. So do you think that truly, no matter what, even
Mhm.
if you're the most reserved individual or quiet individual that sits in the background, doesn't participate, engage, whatever it may be, there's a brand that is being portrayed in any situation for every single person?
I absolutely do. I mentioned earlier before we started the recording that I did a little homework. So I took some notes and I wrote something down because I thought I wanted to share this with everybody.
Mhm.
And I wrote for better or for worse, for better or for worse, in today's world, everybody has a brand. If we think about all the social media, whether you're a big player like me and Instagram and my famous hashtag, that jokingly, I do have the craziest hashtags. I admit that. I
Mhm.
know.
Very true.
For better for worse, everybody's. You don't have to agree,
Oh,
Rich. I mean,
sorry.
push back on me. No, Ray, you're wrong. Everybody's got a brand, and you need to develop your brand. You need to be comfortable with the idea of a brand. The other thing I found, I want to share this also, just when we're talking about branding.
Mhm.
You're familiar with Jeff Bezos. He's the
Yes.
number one, probably one of the richest men in the world. Of course, he's the founder, if I remember correctly, keep me honest, of Amazon.com.
Yes. Yeah.
Said, quote, I wrote this down, quote, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Let me say that again. Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. I got to tell you, that's a terrifying concept, boy. It kind of keeps me up at night just thinking about that. What people say about you when you're not in the room. Wow. I know we have a tendency not to really think about brand. That's why I'm so passionate about this. We all need to manage it. We all need to acknowledge it. What do you think about that quote? Ugh,
I,
scared
I'm
me.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I've actually used that quote when
Have you?
I've done
Oh,
trainings for professional branding. Yeah,
yeah,
because
perfect.
that's the way to look at it. It is, and I love that you came prepared. That is your brand. Everybody knows that. So the first thing is, yeah, what do they say about you when you're not there? And
Right.
even what did I always say this, when you're walking down the street and people are looking at you, an instant perception occurs from both parties. You about that other person, them about you, depending on how you walk, how you're dressing, right? How you hold yourself. And there's not even any communication. You don't even know each other.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think I've taken this from you as well. Is you put a picture up of somebody in your trainings, and you say, "Tell me about them."
Mm-hmm.
Right? And all of a sudden, they're able to kind of create this whole scenario about this individual. So first part is from the beginning, without even saying anything, a brand is built, right? And then, as you mentioned, when you're not in the room, what are they
Mm-hmm.
saying about you? You and Jeff together said that. Um, so
Mostly Jeff.
so I love that. I love that quote. And I think it's important to say, hey, look, yeah, it's scary, but it also could be awesome, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I said at the very beginning that I wish somebody had told me this stuff, 20, 30 years ago. That would have been, it would have been very helpful, personally, professionally. But hey, if we can share some of this and it changes people's the way they do things, that's a good thing.
And that's our discussion here today, right? Is
Yeah,
hey, look, realizing first off, you're gonna have a brand. You can be the quietest person, you can be the loudest person, whatever it may be, anything in between. You're gonna have a brand. You can have a brand without even saying anything.
yeah,
And people, for better or worse, as you used before, are going to say things about you when you're not there.
yeah,
I think there's our discussion here puts it in a light where it's like, okay, cool. I'm glad people are saying good things about me when I'm not there, right? It doesn't always
yeah.
have to be negative. So, kind of diving into that, let's talk about that importance and how we can build off of this, and we'll discuss creating and curating your own brand. But we have the definition of a brand. We have the
Yep.
realization that everybody has one, no matter what.
Mhm.
Just one quick summary is what is the importance of professional branding, keeping it in a professional setting? We'll talk a little more about personal towards the tail end, but what is that
Mhm.
importance? You talked a little bit about applying for a job, taking the next steps towards promotion, but would you mind
Yeah,
digging in more?
yeah. I think it's just look, um, a professional career, one's professional career, it's going to take. If you think about it from a percentage standpoint, what it's going to take, hopefully not a high percentage, but it most likely will take a high percentage of our time, our energies, our resources, of course. So I think it's important to just be able to own your brand, right? And that means not just understand and acknowledge the fact that you have one, but actively monitor it, actively grow it. And what's really interesting about professional brand is what you start out today in 5 years time or 3 years time or even 20 years later, you can make adjustments.
Mhm.
We can talk a little bit more about some of those things a little later, but
Sure.
I think it's just important, and that's why it's so important to monitor it, because where you are today versus where you are, not in the context of just tomorrow's date, but tomorrow, in the future at some point. You got to be able to keep an eye and make adjustments as you go forward. So it's incredibly important. Yeah, I
Yeah,
do think it's really important. Yeah.
and that's interesting, right? So to start off with what you mentioned was obviously being incredibly important and making adjustments. It's not something that's going to occur overnight, right?
Oh, I totally agree. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Totally
And
right.
would you even say the realization? So there's, and we're gonna bounce around a little bit here, but a question that I get asked that kind of caters off of what you just mentioned is, I want to create a professional brand. I want to be someone who's seen as a success, who's seen as a leader, who's seen as responsible. I think everybody really wants all of those.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes some people aren't at those stages yet. So they have to kind of, do you feel like there's a realization of, hey, look, let's start at something that is obtainable and genuine first, and then you could start crafting and building up?
That's a great question. I would say the first thing that you need to understand is, other than what we've just mentioned about acknowledging the fact that you have one, you need to foster it, is just to kind of understand, what's your purpose? What do you want your brand to say about you? So I agree with you, Rich. Be true to yourself, be authentic, and I know I always make jokes about every time I walk by the mirror, I laugh, and I do actually. That is true. But that being said, it's important to be able to look in the mirror and just kind of have that one-on-one.
Mhm.
Being not figurative, of course, having that one-on-one honest discussion with yourself. Just really understand what is it that where do you want yourself? This is not a light switch, as you just mentioned. It's not something you flip on, turn off, and instantaneous gratification. Boom, here it is. It takes planning, it takes work, it takes introspection, it takes commitment and discipline. So it's to your point, Mr. Bowers. I totally agree. I think part of it is being honest with yourself, being authentic, and acknowledging the fact that once you've defined your purpose, just kind of thinking about where you want to go from A to B.
And I really like that you stress that, right? Is, defining a purpose. What do you want? Don't blindly go out there and just say, let me just throw this trait in my toolbox.
Yeah.
So if I'm starting out in the corporate world, just let's say just joining the corporate world, and not, we'll talk about a leader in a few, but just say somebody joining a corporate world. Do you think there's some obtainable brands that they should start out with in that toolkit, so to speak?
Yeah, I think the first one of the first stops is maybe just identifying, what's your passion? What do you like doing? What do you love doing? What gets your heart rate up? Kind of understanding that. You know, for me, I love the idea of helping people to better understand things. That's why I've been an L&D guy for a long time. I love helping people. It's always been my passion. I can remember even as a kid, my dad would ask me, he'd say, "What do you want to do as when you're an adult?"
Mhm.
And I would say, "Dad, I'm never going to be an adult." And those that know me know that I might be an adult by age, but anyway, I digress. But the point is, teaching and getting involved, helping others, helping people to climb the next step. That's always been my passion. I've always enjoyed it. I've always loved it. It gets my heart up, my heart rate up.
What what a
Not
great
to the point of detriment. I
I,
hope, God
I
willing.
was I was a little worried. I'm gonna have to run
I
over there
know, really,
to
but take it
Hackensack.
easy.
So yeah, you know what? I love that answer. Because it's not one that you hear all the time with the brand. You hear these ones of, again, I want to be a leader, I want to be in control, I want to, be known as a builder, whatever it is, but y- passionate to help others, and that is 100% genuine. From the experience that I had with you over all these years, but passionate to help others. So you're starting out with a genuine skill almost, right? Passion, desire to do
Yep.
it. And then you cultivate that more and more. And obviously you turned it into a career. How did you cultivate it more as you got into the work environment? Let's just pick that one. So you're taking a genuine trait that you have,
Yeah.
and then obviously, when you're a child, a little bit different than when you become a professional and people are, looking towards you for guidance. How did you cultivate that throughout the way?
Another great question. Wow, you came prepared, sir. You were a Boy Scout. Boy Scout motto: be prepared. I love it. Um, Actually, I was a Boy Scout, Troop 137.
No,
I'm a strange duck. I get it. But
no,
anyway,
that's awesome.
no, I agree. It's a great point. And, I may have shared this with you, publicly or privately or both, but, I've always been very blessed, very fortunate. I always had great mentors, people that I respected because they were forthright, they were honest, they were transparent, they were credible, they were incredibly intelligent. They were, they had great credentials and expertise and experience. I had one back in my early days when I first started at Sony Electronics. One of my first bosses, my first manager, her name was Elaine Reck, and she had a very unusual management style. She believed that that it was okay to have some tomfoolery during work. It was okay to have honest discussions. She really promoted this idea of, I know it's a very popular phrase nowadays. Back then, back in the 19 blah blah blah, I won't say years, but it was a long time ago. But yeah,
Mhm.
she promoted this idea of having a growth mindset. She promoted just testing the water. So I would say, to answer your question, if there is a trusted resource, somebody who will give you honest, valuable insights, someone that will listen well, and somebody who has worked with you, that has experience with, or some experience working with you, kind of knows their ins and outs a little bit, they would probably can give you some guidance. Kind of help you to find that direction, or help you to make course corrections as needed.
Awesome. And that's again another add-on that I actually wasn't even expecting to chat necessarily about today was yeah, you don't have to do this alone. There's no reason to. And you and I have both been fortunate. We had a great mentor, and still do, with Raul Sharma, author of Habits for Miracles.
Yeah.
And right, and he's been somebody who, at least from my end, a lot of empathy as well throughout his guidance. But that's the great piece, right? Is if you get a mentor who's maybe lived through the experience,
Mhm.
can guide you without any ulterior motives. That's a key thing with mentors, right?
Yeah.
as well as maybe even kind of, well, actually, not even kind of, ones to highlight areas for you to improve or that you're missing in.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you're having those one-on-ones in the mirror, some people, myself
Mm-hmm.
included, may not recognize some faults, right, at times.
Yeah.
And so having a mentor who can approach it in the right way to help say, hey, look, let's focus on this to help build your brand and get those steps going. Having that guide is just absolutely outstanding. So that's a good point, Ray. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
No,
No, no, no. I
please.
was just gonna say, I mean, other than, we talked about, you know, defining your purpose, kind of going through that process, and then I've mentioned, identifying what those passions are, but also like your interest. What are they? Hobbies. What are those social networks, those social circles that you like to interact with? These will give you some tips and tricks as to, maybe some directional information that you'll need to help you to start to build one's professional brand. I just forgot to mention that. I just wanted to throw that out there.
And I always like your approach with this. Every time we chat about it, it's so it's so real, right? Where your view of professional branding caters around pure genuineness,
Yeah,
passion, and a hobby. And you can see that in your own growth, right? Throughout your times as you share with me.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I agree. It's I look, as I've been saying, this the branding, your professional brand. Think of it as kind of this. It's kind of like taking care of somebody,
Mhm.
right? You look after them, you worry about it. I mean, you don't want to worry, of course. I don't mean that in the overly concerned sense, but you want to you want to be invested in your brand. And so you want to identify, again, the kind of your purpose, your hobbies, your passions. You want to be able to identify a resource or two, hopefully more than two or three, somebody so you can get different points of view
Mhm.
who can help you to shape and mold and direct you with your brand.
And you can even get ones that are in different areas, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Correct.
Yeah.
So not
Great point.
necessarily you and I both in learning and development. The mentor who Raul was learning and development too. But you're saying even outside of your industry or day-to-day responsibilities, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Rich, beautifully stated. Love that. Yes, I totally agree. You're a very smart young man, sir. Yes, you are. I will
Thank
tell
you.
you that. You know, I totally agree, especially if you're young and your professional brand is just kind of getting off the ground.
Mhm.
Venturing into areas or industries or identifying people within those industries or areas, I have always found that people are always willing to help. You ask, hey, I'm so and so, I'm Ray McIntyre, I'm looking to break into this industry. Do you have a few minutes of time to kind of, give me some insights to help me out? I
Yeah.
have found that most people, if they can't do it, they'll say, look, I'm happy to help, just not now. I can schedule a time for you 15 minutes later with us meet over a cup of coffee, something. But I got to tell you, I have found that most people will be very helpful. So don't be shy. I guess that the message here is I have this famous, not famous, infamous uncle on my mother's side, the Italian side of my family.
Mhm.
And his he always says, Raymond, and this is the way he talks to me. Raymond, you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah.
So he's right off the boat from Italy, he's Sicilian. You don't ask, you don't get. The moral of the story is don't be shy.
Yeah.
Ask. If the worst comes to worst, they say no, thank you. I can't help you. Okay,
That's it.
good. Move on.
Yeah.
That's it.
And two things there, right? Especially when you're asking for help in a genuine sense. You're not trying to sell anything, right? People aren't going to be rude about it. Maybe they don't respond or they say, "Hey, no, unfortunately, I don't have the time." Nobody's going to do anything bad in response. And then nowadays, virtual is so much easier, right? Sure, I don't have to take 15-30 minutes out of my way to come visit you or vice versa or whatever, set up the house for a visit, whatever it could be. You just hop on webcam like this
Yeah.
and it's a true 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in your thought here. And this is one of the questions I wanted to ask you about the strong professional branding. Um, does it have to be something that drastically stands out? Like, a big, huge flag that says, hey, this is my strength of professional branding? Or can it be something that, hey, look, it just matches, it goes to the flow, it's not overwhelming? Does a professional brand have to be, I guess, dominant?
That's a really good question. Boy, again, very well prepared, sir. I think the answer is, and I know you're going to bust my chops on this. I think the answer is it kind of depends, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
if you want to, if you're a young person, young man, young woman, and you're looking to, your aim is to be the CEO or the vice president, the president of the company, then yeah, I would, probably have a more aggressive focus on my brand, and I'd focus on those skills and competencies that would make a difference, like harnessing or honing my leadership skills, knowing the industry, things of that nature. If I'm not interested, it's not my passion, not my sweet spot. I just want to, I don't want to blend into the background, but at the same time, I want to be, well respected for the quality of my
Yeah.
work. My focus is a little different. So it's kind of a, I don't know, it's not a black and white answer. Sorry, Mr. Bowers, but I
No,
think it really kind of depends. What
actually,
do you think? Do you agree or disagree with me? Push back on
well,
me if you think I'm crazy.
no,
Well,
well, um, actually, the response that you gave matches perfectly with what you said professional brand is. You mentioned that to set a professional brand, you have to establish an objective first,
yeah,
right? So then that caters to what you just mentioned is if you have a goal to be the next CEO or, a leader in any type of capacity, then you probably do look for a little bit more dominant branding
yeah,
as you're building it. But if you're looking for somebody to be successful in your job at hand, and like you're looking at the next step ahead, which is phenomenal, right? Not everybody has to jump to 20 steps and 30 years ahead, or sooner. But in your case, it's perfect to start out, especially when you first join, with, hey, let me get my objective. My objective is to come on in here, be successful, get that next promotion. Then yeah, that matches up. So, as you mentioned, you said depends, but it depends on that objective, which you gave that definition in the beginning. So I think it's spot on. I 100% agree. I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that your personal brand has to be, or excuse me, professional brand has to be dominant. It does not,
no,
right?
no,
Because it goes back to being genuine. But
yeah,
it could be something you're known for. You could be known for being dependable,
hmm
right? Punctual,
hmm
right? And on the flip side, you could be known for not dependable and not, punctual, which is something you want to avoid.
yeah. That's an excellent point. Remember what we said? We both were loving the Jeff Bezos quote about your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room.
Yeah.
I would be horrified if I left a room and somebody left the hot mic on or something like that, and someone said, that Ray McIntyre guy, he never finishes his work on time. He's never on the job on time. There's always typos in his emails and his documentation or his deliverables. He's got sloppy PowerPoint slides. They don't make any sense. Eek! Oh my gosh, that not only would I be mortified and embarrassed, but what does that say about me as a human being? The quality of my deliverables.
Mhm.
So yeah, I agree. Yes, you gotta have that sensitivity to things. Yes.
Well, I'll tell you, Ray, when I shared that I was doing this conversation with those around me and the team and others, and I was having professional branding, and it was with you, they just said perfect. So they're all very, very excited. So you didn't have that at all, but you bring up a really good point that I wouldn't mind spending a few moments on here, and that is the impact of poor professional branding or a negative professional branding. And kind of starting with, you probably look at from corporation standpoint. I mean, Facebook literally changed their name because of some negative branding that was occurring.
Yeah.
But what is the impact of poor professional branding? Maybe outside of just losing a job, are there other impacts that you've seen?
Yeah, I think you can definitely hurt you in the professional sense. It could be the difference that if your professional brand is taking a hit, or it's of a poor impression, or people have a poor perception of your professional brand, um, and that could be the difference between you getting promoted or you getting passed over for a promotion.
Yeah.
Or what if there's a new opportunity that presents itself, and there's the manager, senior manager, their leader, and he or she or they say, all right, we have this great opportunity. Let's take a look at our team. We've got 4 or 5 people. Well, this guy, this Ray McIntyre guy, well, I don't know, his brand, he's always late. He doesn't dress professionally well, or this or that. In other words, they list all the
Yep.
negative attributes of your brand.
Yeah.
All right, take him off the list. So now I'm not being considered for opportunities, new opportunities. So yeah, it definitely can. It's definitely important. You definitely need to be aware of that, and you can have a negative impact on your brand. Yeah.
And it sticks with you. One of an example I always give is you kind of think back to let's say high school. Let's throw it back a little bit. And there's a person that you think of maybe who didn't have a great professional brand or personal branding, right?
Uh,
And if you see them on the street, 20, 30, 40 years later, you still think about how they were in high school, right? You say, I'm not going to go talk to PD over there, whatever it
yeah.
may be. And it's decades later, and it sticks with you, and it can do exactly what you just mentioned. Is it can even be a year, 2 years in a professional setting where an awesome project comes up
Yeah.
and somebody gets passed over for it because, like, remember that month where so and so was late every day or didn't turn something in? I don't know if we can depend on them for a project.
Yeah.
Right?
And
So
back to what you were saying earlier, Rich, you talked about you gave this example of that picture is presented on a screen, and it's of let's say somebody that's dressed like a motorcycle biker, bad
sure.
dude type of
Yep.
thing, right?
Yep.
And you ask your audience, take a look at the picture. I'll time you within 5 seconds. Tell me your impressions, and people say he's a criminal, or he's a bad dude, or he hurts people.
Yep.
Now that same person and put him in a lab coat, like he's dressed like a doctor, and then people automatically change their point of view. So my point is, perceptions make the difference. They
Yeah.
definitely make the difference. But I do want to give one note of hope here. And what does Apple, Nintendo, and Robert Downey Jr. all have in common? It's not a trick.
I,
It's kind of a trick question, but I'll answer the question. And
yeah,
that
go
is,
for it. I don't know.
Apple at one point, I'm a lot older than you, so I remember this. Apple at one point, they were nearly bankrupt.
Mhm.
Yeah, they were nearly bankrupt. They fired the guy that started the company, Steve Jobs. Of course, he's has since passed away. But
Mhm.
the board recognized that they were on the verge of being bankrupt and failing and closing their doors to where they are today. They've got trillions of dollars. I mean, they're just super successful.
Yeah. 3 trillion that they just hit too. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Mhm.
I wish I had bought their share of stock back in the day, but that's another conversation. We'll talk about that later. Robert Downey Jr., famous actor, made the role of Iron Man in all those Marvel comic book universe
Mhm.
movie. He was a drug addict. He had problems every time you opened up the newspaper. There were stories of him, drunk and disorderly and this and that. Look at him today.
Yeah.
Nintendo at one point they used to sell playing cards,
Mhm.
and now this one's maybe a little dated, I admit, but I remember Nintendo.
Yeah.
Um,
Of
but
course.
I used to have a Commodore 64. I'm sure all our listeners will have to Google that one, but the point is that even then, I want to give this message of hope that if your brand does take a hit, right, for
Mhm. Yeah.
whatever reason, you can resurrect it. That's my point. That's my message of hope.
Awesome. And I love those examples. And just so you know, I do remember the Apple, with Steve
Yeah.
Jobs
Okay.
looking up to
Okay.
Bill Gates because Microsoft helped them out a little bit, but helped themselves out. Yeah, see, I got this.
Right. That's right.
Um,
Good
so
memory. in my
You
brain.
know what? I'm just a techie. So,
Yeah.
all right. So then that gives me. I have two more questions for you, and both of them may be a little bit longer answers. But then I know you're a busy man with all of your professional branding stuff that's going on. But let's go off of that. So, how can you kind of craft or change your brand
Mhm.
to match, what you want to do or where you want to go? So what steps can you do to kind of craft it? Either a situation where you're resurrecting your brand, you're altering it, because frankly, also, when you get into different positions, there's different qualities that you have to have,
Mhm.
right? Overall. So how do you go about, maybe let's do this: A, realizing what to do;
Mhm.
B, setting a plan; and then C, following through.
Okay. Wow,
Mhm.
three-part question. Wow,
Sorry.
you're beating up on me this morning. I like it. I love it. I
It's
love
just
it.
been great. I got to get as much information as I can.
Yeah, no, this is great stuff. I love this topic.
Mhm.
Um, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. First and foremost, recognize that you have a brand. That's so important. You can't turn a blind eye to this. Whether you want it or not, it's there, folks. It's just there. So acknowledge it, accept it. All right. Second, if you have somebody or somebody's plural, I'm slaughtering the English language a little bit this
That
morning.
works.
That's all right. I've only had
Yeah.
12 cups of coffee. It's okay. But yeah, if you have a trusted resource, somebody you can really trust, someone will give you the honest scoop. Hey, as I said, I had Elaine Reck. She
Mhm.
was a great boss. She was always honest and forthright. She would tell me, Ray, you're going in this direction. You should maybe pump the brakes a little bit and reconsider your go forward plan here. Maybe you need to be trained on something else. Maybe you need to consider. Maybe you need to be more introspective about where you want to go. What are your passions, your hobbies, your interests? So those things help. All right. Again, I just want to reinforce this notion that brand is a living, breathing thing. Right? You can nurture it, you can take care of it, and you can direct it. You're in control. You're in control.
Yep.
Boom. All right. The world is a crazy place. I think we can all acknowledge that, all agree to that. You're in control of your brand. Next, I would just, once you've identified, your hobbies, your expertise, your credentials, you see, I know this is just an audio thing, but Mr. Bowers can see this. Like I always have my credentials behind me on the video.
That
You
was
know,
very impressive.
yeah, no, it took a long, long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's why I have so many gray hairs. But that and my two sons, right? But understanding your credentials, your interests, your hobbies, as we've been saying, and then start crafting a personal narrative. You know, what is it that you want your brand to say about you? So, in other words, think about it in the context of, you know, if you were not in the room, you just left the room. What would you want those people to say about you as you exit? So, start thinking about those things. You know, I know everybody hates that question. If you're in an interview, somebody says, tell me about yourself.
Mhm.
Oh, that's a fearful question. How do you even answer that question? That's a tough,
Yeah.
but I think it's important to start thinking about, one's experiences, reflect back on those experiences, those moments of joy or passion, and that will help you to construct your personal narrative. I think that's the next step. So define your purpose, you know, um, audit your professional brand as it currently stands. Start thinking about and constructing your personal narrative. I think is the next step. And what do you say? What do you say? Do you think I'm on the right track so far, Mr.
Uh,
Bowers?
I think you're great. I actually have a couple. Sorry, I have a couple follow-up things for that too.
Please,
No,
jump
I
in.
think let's go kind of in reverse. So yeah, tell me about yourself. When they ask that question, when you're talking about talk about your brands, right? You're highlighting what you want to be known for in the interview setting and give examples. So again, kind of establishing that. So perfect there.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I mean, you have overall from that takeaway that I got there, Ray,
Mhm.
was there has to be a game plan and one that's obtainable,
Yes.
right? You have to set up, you have to follow it. Now, you and I had a previous discussion on creating good habits. Building a brand takes good habits as well, right? To get there. And by the way, also with your other side would be taking feedback well from your mentors. So a quick thing too, when you mentioned Elaine Reck was, and she shared with you to go a different direction. And I think this is important for a lot of people building their brands and working with mentors.
Mhm.
How did you handle that? Because I can see some people getting defensive, like, hey, look, I want to be, a leader. Well, you know what? We're not there yet. We can get there. Let's put some stuff in place. But how did you respond to that?
Yeah, that's a great. Damn it, if I had $1 for every great question you'd have, I'd be a gazillionaire by now, Mr. Bowers.
You know what? You're just bringing up great points. It's making me think. So
No,
that's
no,
all
no.
nice.
You get the credit, sir. But that's an excellent question, and I will warn you, you gotta. It's so I have a tendency. I, as a human being, Raymond McIntyre, of Hackensack, New Jersey, I have a tendency to take things personally. That's me. That's the way God wired me. So that's just the way I am. It takes I have to really focus and set my mind to this idea that I have to have that growth mindset, right? I have to accept the fact that there may be something that I've done or didn't do or some type of constructive feedback that will help me and not to take it personally. And it can be challenging. I absolutely agree. So with Elaine, the good thing about her was she acknowledged, she saw that I was getting upset about it, that I was getting defensive. It's a human thing. Nothing wrong with it. We're all
Nothing.
human beings. We are all prone to failure, mistakes. Of course we are. Not so much you. Me, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But,
Thanks.
in those experiences, there think of it as in those instances when you have a mentor or somebody, a trusted resource who tells you the truth, look at it from the standpoint of this is going to help me. This person isn't saying this to hurt me. They're
Mhm.
saying it to help me to be a better person, a better quality person, better at deliverables, better at whatever I'm doing, fill in the
Yep.
blank. So
Yep.
yeah, it can be tough. I agree.
It's totally right. I like the way you say it's okay because it is. We're all going to be defensive when somebody says something is wrong or there's an improvement or you're going in not the right direction. I think it just be aware when you're getting a mentor, it's almost like I don't know, choosing a new car. You want to make sure you're going to trust that mentor. So that way when you do get that feedback, you know it's from a good spot.
Yeah,
Right? If you don't trust the mentor from the beginning, don't use them as a mentor. Right?
yeah,
That's what I think you and I were talking about it. They shouldn't have an ulterior motive. So that way
hmm
you know that they're coming as genuine as possible with your best interest,
hmm
right? Overall. So that way you can say, hey, look, let me take a step back. They're not saying this to be mean or to pick on me or whatever it may be. They're saying it to better myself. So I love it. Um, last question. I wanted to take advantage of you while you're on here today due to this article that just came out. I thought it'd be perfect to ask you this question. So, a Bloomberg article came out, and this is about newer leaders. They call them rookie leaders. Um, and it said 20% of employees under rookie managers, quote, lose sleep. And then a third of them say they have had bad experiences with rookie managers. And a lot of times, and you and I have seen a lot of people be promoted who may or may not have been ready for it, may have been better for an individual contributor role. But for those who are moving to a new leader opportunity,
hmm
what do you say are some brands that they should focus on for themselves so that way their employees are not losing sleep, every single day, as this article says?
Yeah, great question. Again, um, yeah, that's very interesting data, and it doesn't really surprise me. I would say that if you're a young professional and or you are moving into a new management role or a new management role or functional role, one of the things I would focus on is making sure those critical competencies that make managers successful, that you have those or that you start developing them. For instance, as a simple example, active listening. That's a big one. You got to be able to listen to your people. Uh, Ideas come from your team. Communicating, communication is another element. So active listening, being able to share ideas, to communicate vision, communicate, what are the objectives? This is how we're going to do it. Those are important skills to have. So as a new manager, I would maybe assess where I am on those two things. Am I good at as an active listener? Let me ask my significant other. If my significant other is Jules, and I would ask her, Jules, so am I a good listener? Am I empathetic? Do I communicate well? I'm sure I'll get some honest feedback, especially if anyone that knows my
Mhm.
Jules, she'll tell you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
She won't pull any punches. But my point being, again, a good resource. Find somebody who you've partnered with in the past, who has some history with you. They will
Mhm.
be able to give you some insights, plural, to that.
Perfect. And that's a great way to wrap it up. Just to kind of put in here, active listening, communication, empathetic, something that can be it's not easy to obtain, especially with some folks with active listening, right? Or being able to communicate these challenges. But those three areas are absolutely critical because you're building the respect of the team, right? And they have that faith that you'll listen to them. So that's a wonderful spot to wrap it up because those three traits, as a rising leader or new leader, right? An
Mhm.
existing leader or somebody new to the industry, those three areas of branding are
Yeah,
phenomenal for anybody, right? So
yeah, yeah.
Ray, as you know, I can hang out with you all day, and we have many times.
Yes, we have, especially with cigars and beverages. Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Can't wait till the next one. And again, I appreciate your knowledge here. This is going to be helping others. Certainly, I think the advice that you've shared is helpful, as I just mentioned, at any level.
For sure.
So Ray, I thank you for your time. Um,
It's my great pleasure, sir. Please, if anybody needs, any help, I always tell people I'm always happy to help. So please, I guess part of my brand, right?
there
I
you
love
go.
helping people. So, if you guys have any questions, follow up, please rope me in. I'm always happy to help. Always.
And with Ray McIntyre on brand, I'm
Um,
Rich Bowers, and this is Corporate Bytes. Take care, everybody. Thanks again,
thanks,
Ray.
everyone.